Hi golfers, Rob Cheney here from Golf Tech Singapore. Welcome to another video. Today's video is going to be outside. We're going to be outdoors in the short game area at Champions Golf. You may be wondering why I'm not recording this intro from outside. Well, the truth is I did, and I deleted it. So this is an impromptu second recording of the introduction. We are going to be doing uphill and downhill lies around the green. So dealing with those awkward slopes in and around the green. I hope you enjoy the video. So we'll start with the uphill lie. This one I find, in my experience at least, gives people slightly less of a problem than the downhill shot, which we'll come to later on. But there's still some considerations you need to have for this shot and some modifications you need to make to your setup and the swing in order to successfully navigate this shot compared to a standard shot off of a flat lie. So we have an uphill lie here. The expectation to begin with would first of all be that this shot would fly higher than you would normally expect. And the ball's sitting on an upslope, the expectation ball's going to go higher, generally it's going to land softer, roll a little bit less. So you need to take that into your consideration of your shot selection or your club selection before you play this shot. I would ordinarily play 90–95% of my shots around the green with my lob wedge, my 58 degree, and I'm going to do the same here. But if I wanted this ball to run or fly a little bit lower, I'd probably consider changing my club and going down to a gap wedge or even a pitching wedge. So as I begin to set up to this ball, I feel the slope wanting to pull my weight down onto my back foot. That can have the effect of encouraging the ground contact to be too early. Although the ground sits in this fashion and the fact that there's less ground behind the ball than on a regular shot, that can actually make life a lot easier for players. But if you allow your weight to fall back too much on this shot, and that's generally what I see, you're going to find that you start to have contact problems, hitting the ground before the ball or not hitting the ground at all and topping the ball straight across the other side of the green. So I've seen this shot described and explained in many different ways. I'm going to share with you my preference in terms of how I want to set up and execute an uphill chip shot. I'm going to keep my feet close together as I would do for a standard shot. If you haven't seen my video on a standard shot yet, make sure you do go and check it out. I'm going to keep my feet close together, but in order to overcome the slope, I'm going to really feel like I push my hips to the left. So although I'm on an upslope and although I still have my shoulders tilted to match the slope more or less, I am not doing that by leaning backwards. I'm doing that by moving my lower center, which for the purpose of this exercise, just think about your belly button or your belt buckle, and I'm moving that forwards. So I have 100% of my weight, 95% of my weight when I rest my foot on the ground on my lead side, but I'm not leaning into the slope like this. That would cause problems. That would make you hit more down and stab the club into the ground. So I'm creating this tilt of my spine so that I can match the slope, but I'm doing so by moving my hips forward, not by moving my shoulders back. And that's an important distinction between those two. I see people get those wrong all the time. So when they're on an upslope, they stand with their feet wide, they let their weight ride onto their back leg, and as already touched on, they start to have some real significant issues with contact. So as I continue to set up here, I'm going to place all of my weight on the front foot by moving my lower center forwards. I'm going to keep the ball relatively central or slightly forwards in my stance, ever so slightly, because now what I need to do as I chip and make the swing is I need to place more emphasis on continuing to move my hips forward through the stroke, and that's to allow for the club to continue to shallow as it goes through impact and for the club head to go up the slope, rather than what can often happen in this shot is for the club to start to dig or stick. And if players get that feedback, their reaction can often then be to cup their wrist, start flexing their arms to bring the club away from the ground, and once again they start topping balls. So quality of contact here and consistency of contact is what we're looking for. In order to achieve that, I'm going to place my weight as far forward as I can by moving my hips forward. I'm going to keep my arms fairly straight, and as I execute this shot, I'm just going to keep moving my hips forward to allow my spine to tilt, and allow the club to come away from the ground without me having to pull it away from the ground. So if I said this and broke this down into some of the 10 words, I'm going to say weight forward, I'm going to say arms straight, and as you hit the shot, I'm going to say tuck hips. Nice contact, ball flew high, stopped very quickly. So that was a nice shot. The interaction with the turf there was fairly light. There's no digging into the ground. It's a very, very small sort of divot there where I hit the shot. And the location of that divot, which is most important, is slightly after the ball. So one more time, take your setup, balls are slightly forwards of center, feet close together, push your hips forward to create this spine tilt. And then as I go to hit the shot, keeping my weight forward, keeping my arms straight, I'm going to really concentrate on continuing to just tuck my hips under me and move my pelvis forwards. Another nice one. So the weight stays forward throughout this stroke. There's no need to start moving back. If we start moving around, we're going to mess up the contact. So give that a try. That's the uphill shot. If you had some success with that, do let me know in the comments down below. If you do it a different way and have a lot of success, do make a note of that as well. I'm interested to hear how people try and deal with this shot around the green. The uphill shot, as I said at the beginning, is one that I think players have, generally speaking, have less trouble with. It's the downhill one where people have the most nightmares. So let's move on to a downslope and see if we can help you with that one. So now we've moved to the other side of the green and I find myself on a downslope. Quite an awkward downslope here, and you know, the amount of slope you find yourself on will increase or reduce the amount of difficulty, but in essence the downslope is the shot, the downhill lie is the shot that I see amateur golfers have the most difficulty with. You have to understand the limitations that this shot has in terms of what you can and can't do, and just recognize the factors here that are making life difficult for you. So let's start by just simply acknowledging that as the ground sits like this and our ball's in center here, the ground behind the ball is now higher than it would be for a standard shot. So if I do nothing else and make no modifications at all to my setup, the likelihood is as I swing, I'm going to strike the ground behind the ball. Okay, there should be some logic there, that should make sense to you. The ground is higher, the arc of the swing, if I do nothing about it compared to a standard shot, I'm going to strike the ground before the ball because, as I just said, it's higher in the air. So if I do nothing, I'm going to have a problem. I'm either going to hit the ground or I'm going to be so worried about hitting the ground that by the time the club reaches the ball, I've managed to miss the ground, but the club head is now beginning to ascend, it's coming away from the ground too quickly and I'm going to top the ball. So if that sounds familiar, let's check out a couple of options you have to play this downhill lie much more successfully. There are really a couple of options I teach for this shot. The first one is the simple option, the really basic simple option. I would tell a golfer to stand in their regular stance and set up just to the side of the ball to make a practice swing like I'm about to do. And as I do that, without making any real modifications to my swing or setup at all, I want them to pay attention, and I want you to pay attention to where the club hits the ground. Because for the most part, as I just said, you are going to strike the ground a few inches behind the ball. I'm not really doing anything too different. I've sort of changed my feet here so I don't lose balance, but I'm just really just standing as normal as I possibly can, making a regular swing and paying attention to where the club hits the ground, which for all 4 or 5 of those practice swings was pretty much in the same place here, about 4 or 5 inches behind the ball. You can use that information to your advantage. How about just stepping 4 or 5 inches down the slope and now taking your address position with the club in that location. So I've now got the club 4 or 5 inches back. I'm going to continue my regular swing and now I'm hitting the ground right in the same location, but now I've got the ball there. So that's the most basic way to adapt for this shot, is to stand further down the slope, put the club much further back in your stance with the handle more forwards, make as close to a regular swing as possible, and notice where the club bottoms out, which again for all of those practice swings is in the same place. If I stand in and recreate that, I'm going to get good contact off of a very awkward lie. The limitation with that shot, however, is the fact that the ball will come out much lower. I'm already on a downslope. We said on the upslope part of the video that the ball would fly higher, and the opposite is true for the downslope. The ball's going to fly lower. So it's automatically already going to come out lower, and I'm now placing the ball further back in my stance in order to accommodate the fact that I'm going to hit the ground in a different place. By putting the ball back and the handle forward, I'm reducing the loft even more. So whilst that is the simplest way to do it, it has its limitations. The ball is going to come out low. You are going to need to choose your most lofted club. This is a 60-degree wedge I'm hitting this shot with. But even with a 60-degree wedge, with the ball slightly back on a fairly medium to extreme downslope like this, that ball is going to come out low. That may not fit the shot that you're trying to play if you've got to go over a hazard or something. So if the simple solution doesn't work for you, I'll give you a little bit more information now on how to play the shot and make good contact, increase the height of the shot as well. So this one is a little bit trickier. There's a bit more complexity to this, but I'll include this because I feel like it has a lot of value. And if you practice this shot, it can be a real shot saver and a real score saver around the green. So we touched on the simple version, which was to move the ball back and just stand further down the slope. I've already said that's going to come out too low. So what am I going to do to play a more regular or higher flighted shot off of a downslope? I need to be able to have the club and the ball more or less in the center or even slightly forwards in my stance. But in order for me to be able to do that, I have to really modify the way I stand, because I have to get my body much more forward and my weight much more forward. And if I just kept my feet together and started to lean to the left, I'd get to the point fairly quickly where I'm going to lose my balance. So if you don't widen your stance, you're always going to fall into the trap of correcting your body weight and being too far back. So the first part of this modification for a higher shot would be to have the feet much wider. Think bunker shot. This is how I would certainly prescribe bunker shot or a standard bunker shot. Get the right foot much further back and even slightly pulled back, so your stance is a little bit closed. You'll now notice that my ball position looks very, very forwards, but what this is allowing me to do is, because my stance is so wide, I'm able to put my weight forward. So the ball is still very much kind of underneath my sternum. I've got my front foot turned out, very much like the foot flare video. That's to help me keep my weight forward and keep my lead knee forwards. And now, as I set up to this ball, I'm going to really focus on keeping my weight on that left side. Let's make some practice swings and try to pay attention to where the club hits the ground. Once again, the absolute golden rule in chipping is where the club hits the ground. It's pay attention to that contact. The number of times I watch people make practice swings and I watch them have their club hit the ground in a completely different place to where the ball is, and then they stand into the ball and go ahead and completely miss-hit the shot. That's just nonsense. That's kind of crazy, right? Pay attention to where your club is hitting the ground. It's the most valuable lesson anyone can ever give you in terms of short game. Where the club hits the ground is where the gold is. So weight forward, because I've got my foot pulled back, I can keep my head and my weight more forward. This is sort of starting to get my spine and my shoulders more to the left. And as I make these practice swings, I'm really focusing on staying on my front side. I see a lot of people set up well to this shot, and then they make the mistake as they swing back of gliding to the right because it's a bit more comfortable. And now as they swing down, they've completely compromised the low point and they hit the ground in the wrong place. So don't let that be you. Set up with your weight forward, keep your head forward. And as you make these swings, I'm really paying attention to where the club hits the ground. And now I'm going to commit to one. I'm going to step in and hit one. This takes some practice, but with a little bit of practice and an understanding of how to modify this setup, you're going to be able to hit high shots off of a downslope. Perfect, came out lovely. Nice high flight, which really high is more like a medium flight off of a downslope. So although I used a lot of things in that setup and that swing to help me hit the ball high, it came out more or less medium. It certainly didn't come out like a high lob shot would come out off of a flat surface. So again, you have to understand that with a little bit of practice, understanding how to use the setup, how to use the club, you can really play some nice chip shots off of some awkward lies. Guys, thanks again for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I hope those 2 tips are going to help you around the green. You can save some shots if you know how to deal with the challenges of those uphill and downhill lies. If you don't already, please subscribe to the channel. Take a look back at some of the other chipping videos. There's some content in there that I'm sure you'll find very useful. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. And as always, feel free to share it with your friends. Today's video came from a request from one of my online students, was asking specifically for this video, so I decided to shoot it. If you have any other videos you'd like me to shoot, do let me know. Check out the comments section down below, pop your suggestion in the box and I'll see if I can get round to it. Guys, take care, have a great week, and I'll see you next time.